Okay, so this is a follow up to the heuristic conversation, and I want to speak specifically about anxiety. So, in that previous conversation, I talked about schizophrenia and hearing voices, and that's a fairly uncommon phenomenon in most people's lives, whereas anxiety is extremely common, and in fact, I would be willing to say it is a foundational element in what makes us human. There is a writer named Rollo May, and he had a saying. He said, anxiety is a symptom of freedom. Now, if you look at that, it's kind of strange to think about, like, how does my freedom cause me to be anxious? But here's the idea. If you have the choice to make a decision that can damage your life, you should be anxious because it matters. And if you don't have an option to make a choice, then you're really not free. So, every time that you're anxious, notice that you have a choice to make it somewhere in the middle of all this. Now, the next part of this is anxiety manifests in many different ways depending on people's developmental tendencies. So, just very briefly, if it happens before you're 3, it's likely to turn out to be something that's generally unconscious, right? If it's between 3 and 5, it tends to develop more into a personality issue like narcissism or borderline personality or something like that. And if it happens between about 5 and puberty, it tends to be a much more concrete issue. That's when people develop more things like OCD and other, what's the word for it? Well, regardless, I'll have to come back to that. Okay, so the idea is, depending on who you are, your anxiety, if it becomes a problem, manifests in different ways. One way it can manifest is OCD. Another way could be PTSD. Another way could be phobias or social anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder. And what happens is each of those have different effects on life. One isn't necessarily better or worse than others. And in the heuristics conversation, we talked about the issue of diagnosis. Now, to be sure, some mental health issues have a greater tendency towards having a biological basis, and some more towards the environment, and they're always kind of in balance. So you want to look at that carefully. Now, a question might be around perhaps, let's say, OCD. Is this actually a problem? Or is this a function of culture? Because indeed, culture will tell you to be perfectionistic and to tell you to be the best. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that in our human drive, there is an instinct towards achieving status and power. Now, that's not a problem, it's just not generally realistic, right? Because we can't be the president and we can't be Michael Jordan at the same time. We have limitations. And I think that accepting our limitations is a grieving issue that ends up being quite difficult for lots of people. So, all that being said, there's a developmental task of letting go of perfection, of accepting good enough. So, all that said, I just want to say have a good one and take care.